PodcastOne presents the Steve Austin Show Classics.
I'm coming to you from Segundo Brewing Company. I'm sitting here talking with the owner and the founder, Rob Croxall. Y'all remember last time I went took a beer trip? It was all the way to Chico, California to Sierra Nevada Beer. It was a long-ass drive. Today's drive was a lot shorter. Bottom line is, my life is too short to drink bad beer, and I'm here drinking good beer with the owner of Segundo Brewing, Rob Croxall. Rob, now, I always do a show for the working man, by the working man, and that's what you are. You happen to make beer. But that wasn't always the case. You started off in finance for an aerospace company?
That's right.
Give me that long story short, because on your website, elsegundobrewing.com, there is that long story short. But give it to me how it happened, because I get questions all the time to questions@steveaustonshow.com on my website. Hey, Steve, I'm doing this, but I'd like to make a career change. Is it too late? Tell me your story.
Well, it's kind of the standard, if you're miserable enough in your regular job, you'll do something crazy, and that's basically what I did. So I went to school for finance. And, I never had a day where I went home and said that was great. It was more like, oh, my God, what did I just do with 11 hours of my life? So 13 years of that, I kind of got to a point where it was either time to do something or shut up and deal with it. So I had I had been homebrewing for about 8 years at that time, maybe 9 years, and I thought I could make some pretty decent beer on a small scale. Got some people interested in what I was doing for some family help to back me. A few other people I knew to back me. I got accepted to the professional brewers program at UC Davis. And all these things kind of converged, and it was almost like fate came together, and it was time to take a leap. Finally, at the very end, I was at one of the local big aerospace companies, and I was actually going to have to lay off a member of my staff. And I went to my boss and said, hey, I'm going to beer school in February. I'm out of here anyway. Lay me off, give me the package. So I got a check to walk out the door, and that was that.
Hey, man, when you say you're brewing stuff on your own at your house, I kind of started doing a little bit of that at my house over at Gimmick Street. And mine, I'm doing 1- and 2-gallon batches. So obviously you're way more up on the curve than that. But how did you start? And then at the end, what were the batch sizes you were producing that said, hey, let me take this to the next level?
Well, I started basically, everything I always did at home was a 5-gallon size, but I just took the typical path where you start with the extract, which is the malt syrup that you use, and just doing somebody else's pre-designed recipes. And gradually over time, start designing your own recipes, move to whole grain, buy some nicer equipment. But for me, it wasn't so much about going bigger as about going better. Getting better controls, better equipment, and doing your own recipes and kind of fine-tuning it that way.
How did you get better controls?
Just by investing, the biggest thing for homebrewers, and forgive me if I get too technical.
No, that's what these people want to know about. I love beer, and so do the people listening to the show.
You have a lot of homebrewers out there who have these just amazing, automated systems with all kinds of controls dialed in. But a point where people miss a lot is a lot of these guys will just ferment warm under their stairs without temperature control. So dedicating, a fridge with a thermostat, to controlling your temperature and fermentation, it's a critical thing. So, moves like that are what allow you to get better over time. And then you get better cleaning procedures. You just, you get better at recipe development. You get better at the utilization of the ingredients that you have. So,
man, one of the things you guys are critical on is cleanliness here and attention to detail with respect to that.
That's exactly right. People ask me what I do, and a lot of times I say I clean stuff for a living. Because that everybody has this glamorous picture of you with this, looking off into the distance, admiring your beer and how great it is and throwing stuff in the kettle. No, really, you get to do that 5% of the time. Everything else is clean.
Hey, what's the deal here just as far as employees go? What's the beer drinking policy? You make beer, you sell beer. You have this wonderful tap set out here. And if anybody in the Los Angeles area, El Segundo means second city.
Right.
And you were born and raised here.
Born and bred.
So, man, if you come out, y'all open, 7 days a week?
Yeah, we're open 7 days a week.
Man, you got to come by this place. It's on Main Street, right in El Segundo. What's it, 140 Main Street?
140 Main.
And check out this place. It's a badass tap out there. How many beers you got on draft?
Right now we probably have, I'm going to guess, 17 or 18. We have up to 22. We're just now growing into that capacity. So, but we always should have more than 15 different styles on tap.
Now, as we're talking, probably the microphones are picking up some of the ambient noise in the background because there's about 60, 70 people back there sampling beer, drinking beer, and having a good time. How long have you been in this facility?
We took this building in probably summer of 2010, I believe. So we actually did our first deliveries in May of 2011. So we just turned 4.
Okay, just turned 4. Now, I got turned on your beer. I was walking down the aisle, and I saw a brand of beer, Segundo Brewing Company. I saw Citra, and I said, man, that's a good-looking label because, man, when you're out there searching for a new beer, I don't know how you are, but that label has something to do with catching my eye. Mm-hmm. That Citra caught my eye, and I said, man, let me give this a shot. And I really dug it. And at first, I kind of really thought I was drinking more of an IPA, but it's a pale ale.
Right.
And I dug it. And, of course, then I had to start continuing drinking y'all's beer. And me being an IPA guy, found the Mayberry. And that's kind of what I've been hanging my hat on as of late.
Right.
So was the Citra the first batch, the first beer, or what was the first beer that you initially launched?
It's funny. Citra was supposed to be our go-to-market beer when we first started. And this is one of those lessons that I learned the hard way, going from being a home brewer to being a professional brewer. As a home brewer, you can get a couple ounces of any variety of hops that you want, no problem. Not quite so easy to get a couple 100 pounds of the varieties that you want. So, as I'm finishing up my coursework up at Davis, and I decide I'm going to order my hops, for when I get back so I can start brewing, they almost laughed at me when I tried to order Citra. So we were actually put in a position of scrambling because, I knew that Citra was going to be such an easy drinking beer. It's aromatic. The bitterness is on the lower side, so it's a really accessible beer, and that would have been the right beer to go to market. Instead, we were really caught scrambling to come up with another pail to enter the market with.
Okay, so now with did you know the hop demand? You know what the demand is. You know what your demand and everybody else is.
Yeah.
But the supply is very limited.
Supply is limited. So
now,
a lot of
explain
these.
That to me about how you have to place your order, and then also that 10-year mark that some of the hop growers are on with their programs as far as creating.
Yeah. Hops are, for what we do, we are a very hop-centric brewery. Now, there's other breweries that can do, other styles of beer. There's sour breweries out there. There's Belgian breweries out there. But we are very dependent on the hops. The things about some of the varieties that you hear, the ones that have a lot of notoriety, Citra, Mosaic, Simcoe, Sriracha. These are all varietals that have been developed by farmers and developed by these farmers or companies over a number of years. So, they will crossbreed these a couple varieties, and a single individual will go through the hop yard. He'll check out the cones, make sure they're the right size. He'll smell them, and if it passes muster with this one guy, then it can go on to the next stage. But the tricky thing is just because it's a hop that may be fantastic in beer, it may not be hardy enough to weather drought. It may not be pest resistant. So it's really a trial of like 8 to 10 years before these hops even get to market. Then once they do, you have these varieties that they've been developed by these farmers, and not anybody can go out and plant them. So the supply is very limited. So really, if you want to play in this hoppy beer market, you need to be on the ball about getting hops contracts. So as of right now, we are fully contracted all the way through 2021. And I think when we opened up, we were about number 1,500 in terms of breweries in the country.
Right.
Now I think there's double that, and I think there's another 1,000 in planning or some crazy number like that. And every one of these breweries that's coming on thinks they're going to make the next, Pliny IPA hop bomb.
Right.
And so the competition for those hops, they're getting more and more scarce. The demand is just through the roof. So if you're not going to put your money where your mouth is, you probably don't get to play in the hops game.
Hey, tell me about some of the obstacles you run into, because obviously you're a bright guy, college educated, in finance, but all of a sudden you get in the beer world and you've been doing your thing on a small level for about 8 years. Mm-hmm. But all of a sudden you say, hops aren't readily available. You've got to get in line and get your order in. What were some of the other learning curves? I started selling T-shirts on my website. All of a sudden, I got smoked a couple of times because I didn't know exactly what the 411 or the protocol or the process was.
Right.
Back in my WWE days, I wrestled or drank beer in a 20x20. They sold all T-shirts. Doing it on my own, I found out there was a process to it. What are some of the obstacles and things that you had to go through and the learning steps to get where you are today, a highly respected beer here in Los Angeles and in the Southern Cal area, and resonating across the United States?
Well, there's the usual regulatory things. it's not so much obstacles as much as pain in the butt, busy work, but licensing, ABC license, TTB license. At that time when we opened, we were dealing with health department. Those were all things that were time consuming. Dealing with the city of El Segundo was actually great. The city was very in favor of what we were doing. So a lot of that administrative stuff was time consuming, wasn't too bad. On the brewing side, things that I found difficult coming from being a home brewer, going into a professional environment where I'd really only brewed with my friends down the street at Strand Brewing. Joel, the brewer, was nice enough to let me get in his way on some professional brews, but that was my only real professional experience before I did this. And at the end of the day, the things that really got me were things that don't really translate from home brewing. Things like carbonation, things like managing yeast. On the beer side, on the wort production, once you figure out your system, if you can make a good batch of beer at home, you can make a good batch of beer professionally.
All right, we're sitting here at El Segundo Brewing Company. I had to cut Rob off because his phone is going off in the background. That means he owes everybody a beer, not me. All right, back in conversation. Rob sits back down behind his microphone.
Right, sorry about that. So the things that threw me were things that didn't translate from homebrewing, such as carbonation and managing yeast. Carbonation is a fine art. There's so many variables to that. Especially before, when you're really small, you don't have the money to buy a Zom meter, which is a pretty expensive piece of equipment, which we have now. But you're really trying to dial it in by taste and by your senses. I messed everything up, shooting high, going flat. It takes a while to get that dialed in because you're dealing with different, gravities in the beer, different temperatures, and all those factors play in. Same thing on the yeast side at home. You'll buy a new pitch of yeast for $5 every single time because it's perfect every time. You know what you're going to get. Well, you can't really afford to do that on a professional scale. So, we want to get, as many as 15 to 18 uses out of a single pitch of yeast. So that kind of stuff took me a long time to figure out. As far as the wort production, just making the beer, at the end of the day, figure out your system. Beer is still volumes, temperatures, and durations. And if you can make a good batch at home, you can make a better batch on a professional system once you figure out your system because you have more control.
Okay, tell me about beer school or brewing school at UC Davis. What's that all about? What's the protocol? How long is the course?
So what I did was called the Professional Brewer Certificate Program. It's a 2-month program. And, my wife thinks I went and just drank beer for 2 months up in Davis, so that's not the case. It's real coursework. It's 8 hours a day in a classroom, 5 days a week. You have to have college-level engineering and bio to even qualify to get in. So it was absolutely fascinating. And what the core of the program is really the science behind brewing. What's happening, what reactions are taking place, what you need to be looking for. A lot of emphasis on quality control. There's a lot of sensory things, too. There's always the Sensory Fridays where there's Dr. Sue Langstaff, who's renowned in the world of wine and beer and I think chocolate, too, as far as not just how to taste, but what are you tasting it, how do you describe. So Fridays were always the kind of the fun day because that's what you get to go in and taste beer. So basically that set me up with a set of tools that I did not have before. And going there, for me, was really difficult. One, because I'm not an engineer, and two, because I hadn't taken bio or chemistry since I was a freshman in college in '91. So a lot of that class, I think there was about 40 students in our class. You have about a third of these guys who are engineers, so they get all that stuff.
Right.
You have about a third of these guys who are, chemistry, bio type guys, so they get that side. And then you have about a third of us who are these idiot business and music majors who are just learn everything from scratch. So It was really tough. And I found the beer side of stuff fascinating. I struggled with the engineering because that just was not my strong suit. But all in all, I think it really was a valuable tool and it gave me a great set of resources to fall back on when I started this.
Okay, when you first started brewing, doing the stuff, there at your house and doing those 5-gallon batches, how did you go about creating recipes? And then when you get here and you go, professional, you're selling beer. How do you go about creating recipes and do you brew something that you like and hope everybody else will like, or do you brew something that you hope everybody else will like and then just because you're trying to find the wave that everybody else is on? No,
to answer the last part of that first is
I'm sorry, I'm bad about asking 10-part questions.
That's okay. Yeah. But really at El Segundo it's my taste that is the guideline. And the reason we do that, I think, I could go out and I can make Belgian-style beers, but that's not really where my passion is. I love the hoppy beers.
Explain a Belgian-style beer.
Belgian-style beer is a more traditional style beer. Big difference would be the types of malts that you use, usually not as hoppy, different varieties of yeast that will give you a much more yeast kind of dominant character. It could be like a clovey kind of character, bubblegummy, banana, and it's really a whole different genre from what we do. It's still beer, but it's a very different kind of thing. So I think, there's guys that love that, like Henry down at Monkish down in Torrance.
Yep.
He's a fantastic Belgian brewer. He's going to make a better Belgian beer than I am because that's where his heart is. So
right.
We really use, my taste. I try to stay really on top of what's current, hop-wise, within the style. And try to keep the beers current, but still within a beer that I would want to sit down and drink at the end of the day. And then as far as going from, being a home brewer, like I said, you start with other people's recipes and boxes and bags of stuff, and you throw it and then you get somebody else's beer. So over time, you kind of narrow it down to what you think you like, and, so it's just experimentation over and over. And, more of that, that's good. More of that, that's good. Oh, wait, no, that's too much. Back it off, that kind of thing. And I was brewing probably at least every other week, maybe weekly for those 9 years. So I took all kinds of notes. In fact, I still will actually go back every once in a while if I'm doing a new recipe and look at my handwritten notes because I've experimented with, any kind of variety of hops or, different types of malt that you can get your hands on. So, and I kept notes on all that stuff. So if I'm doing a new recipe, I will go back and refer to that stuff. And then making that transition from being the home brewer to going professional, I'm a business major. I'm not an overly technical guy. So I really try to learn by doing more than anything. So what I did, my first batches of beer, I made a very simple pale ale, 2 types of malt, just 2-row and dextro pills, and 2 types of hops, Chinook for bittering and Cascade for flavor and aroma. And very predictable ingredients, very simple beer. You should be able to see what you're getting. So I brewed that beer, looked at what I was getting, and then just kind of adjusted off of that because it's not as simple as, your system is 20 times as big, so now you put 20 times more. It just doesn't work that way. So for me, it was a learn by doing kind of approach. And there's guys who are, who could be on the ball and can scale from their homebrew, recipes all the way up to a big system. That's not me. I really, I know my system very well now. So when I do recipes, I really, kind of pull them out of the air based on what I know this system is going to do.
Hey, you guys have a great IPA, the Mayberry. You have several IPAs, but I really dig the Mayberry. Explain to me the IPA craze and the West Coast style IPA versus something like coming on the East Coast.
Right. So the IPA, I think, the lore is that the IPA was a beer that was made in England, and it was made more hoppy. And slightly higher alcohol to survive the voyage down to the colonies in India. The hops act as a preservative. The higher alcohol also helps. So the thought is that they made these hoppier beers to survive that voyage. That's supposedly the origin of the style. And for the, it's really been maybe the last, 15 years, and growing is when the IPA has really come into being. And a traditional IPA, if you look at like BJCP, which is Beer Judge Certification Programs style guidelines, it should be balanced. It should have hop character apparent, but not kicking you, over the head with hops.
Right. And what about the level of bitterness?
And the bitterness should be, reasonable, but not totally overwhelming. So that's a standard kind of IPA. And you asked, East Coast. I really think of it really as like a Northwest style IPA is much more the mainstream, kind of middle of the road, not going to kill you with hops, but still hoppy, still flavorful, but very well balanced. Whereas you take, the San Diego style IPA or West Coast IPA, as some people will call it, that's characterized by a much lighter color, much less grain or malt flavor coming through, but a much more pronounced bitterness and serious aromatics coming out. And that's really, where my heart lies is the hops are such an amazing thing. You can get from these little flowers, depending on the variety, things tasting anywhere from blueberries to, coconut in some cases, citrus, floral, and it's an amazing, palette to be able to work with.
You're listening to another classic episode of The Steve Austin Show, only on PodcastOne.
How many batches did it take you to come up with the Mayberry? When you just finally got the stuff that's in bottles now that I enjoy, that I drink, how long did it take you to come up with that formula? Was it a one hit, hey man, we got it, or a work in progress?
Mayberry was it wasn't so much. I knew I wanted to do Mayberry, and that started in 2012. I went to the CBC, the Craft Brewers Conference, and it was out in D.C. that year, and I had a beer called Annika, I think, from a brewery called Half Acre, if I think that's right. And I believe it was an all mosaic IPA, and it knocked my pants off. It was absolutely amazing. So I run back to the brewery. I need mosaic. Well, you can't have mosaic. So it took me probably, I'm going to guess, when did we come out? Maybe 14, 15 months after I knew I wanted to do it to make that beer. Now, the thing about the Mayberry is that grain bill that I use is one that I've used on several, because I like to get small batches of these different types of hops. I have a grain bill that I really like because I think it shows them off very well, and I knew that's what I wanted to use with that beer, because I just wanted the mosaic to shine through, and that's what we got with that. So I had high hopes for that beer long before we made it.
But it's work in progress is what I'm getting at. And when you say you were inspired by that beer, you weren't inspired to duplicate it, but it inspired your vision of a different beer.
Absolutely. I think of the aromatics.
Yeah, because we've had this conversation before. It's one thing to like a beer. It's a whole different thing to be inspired by that beer and do something that just reminds you of it or was inspired by it, but never try to copy. And I don't think anybody in the craft brew business is trying to copy any other body's beer, because first of all, I think you'd be too proud to do that.
Right. That's not where the fun is, too.
Exactly.
What makes this interesting is going out and doing something from scratch of your own. And if you walked through the brewery before, we have our recipe cards, right there on the fermenters. And my opinion is like, if you want to go spend $1 million and open your own brewery and make my beer and steal my, okay, go right ahead. I don't care. Yeah. But that's not what's fun for me.
Yeah. How do you figure let me see, I'm sorry, I don't have my computer in front of me. I talked about how short this trip was over here. I had all my notes in front of me on my laptop computer and left it on my desk at home. It's funny because I talked to Ken Gross from Sierra Nevada about a year ago, and the West Coast, California, is kind of where the craft brew market really started. And if you go over to Anchor Brewing, Anchor, there's a guy, I forget his name because I don't have my computer in front of me. He was sitting down having a beer, and the guy said to him, you might want to enjoy that. It might be your last Anchor you have for a while, because they were in financial duress.
That's Fritz Maytag back in the 70s. Yes, it is,
Maytag. Yes. So anyway, Maytag ended up buying in.
Yep.
And so Anchor,
he is kind of the godfather of
craft beer. About 65 was when that story happened, when he bought in. And so then, you have Sierra Nevada come in on the heels of that at about 1980. There's another few that were in that same time zone. But why the West Coast? How is the West Coast just all of a sudden kind of the capital of craft brewing? Now, that being said, Sam Adams over there in Boston is probably the number one craft brewer in the United States.
Right. By volume, nobody can touch Sam Adams.
Right.
They're Boston beer.
Yeah.
They're huge. As far as San Diego, I don't know why it became the epicenter of the hoppy beer world, other than I think that you had guys who were just early to the game and who weren't afraid to experiment. look what those guys with Stone were doing, and
right.
Things like that. They're going farther than anybody ever had. I remember that first time I tried, a Ruination, I was like, oh my God, that's like the hoppiest thing ever. And that was just way out there for back then when it came out. So I think it was just more a spirit of experimentation among the guys who happened to be in that area at that time. And it's, for the beer world that I play in, the hoppy beer world, San Diego is still it in my book. Those
right.
guys are so creative. I like to think that our beers follow in that same vein. You really see a much more mainstream acceptance of hoppy beers these days, where 15 years ago people would be turned off by the bitterness, but now just the common palate out there is much more accepting of those style beers.
Man, it was quite incredible. I was on my computer again. I left home and I was looking at the top selling beers in the United States, and also looking at the percentage of market that the craft brewers was, and now it's at 11 to 12%.
Right.
And I think last time you and me were talking that 10% range.
Right.
But of all beer sold, it's a small portion, but it's a large portion. That being said, Bud Light was number one across the board
in the world,
and then and number two I think was Coors Light, and I think Miller Lite was even further down below. Corona snuck in there somewhere. Those are the guys that are, volumes. I know you get respect for those guys. You ever think about making a light beer?
Light beer? No. That's not what my customers want. That's not where my heart is. I'm not interested in that. And, and I'll be perfectly honest. I mean, we could make one. I don't have the interest to do it. It's a very difficult beer to make. And, you touched on the idea of having respect for those guys. There's this common thought that, domestic pilsners, that's a bunch of crap. That's really not the case. Bud Miller, Coors, those guys are perfect every single time.
Absolutely.
And they have a quality that we could not touch. The product itself might be boring.
Right.
But, I mean, they are amazing, breweries.
Right. So then, with the popularity of the bigs and with craft brewery, gaining, but still at 11 to 12%, what is the next move for craft breweries? I mean, how much can this thing grow?
I don't have a definite answer. I think that I don't see it stopping, though. I think, the craft segment has been growing every single year in recent history, and the domestics and imports have been shrinking. The overall beer consumption is down in the U.S., but the overall craft production is up. So we're taking a bigger piece of a somewhat shrinking market. I think it's going to be a move towards the craft brewery staying relatively small. I think that the market is going to continue to be more and more crowded. If you go to a supermarket now, I mean, even like a mainstream supermarket, you have a pretty hefty craft presence there, and that shelf space is not easy to obtain, especially for small breweries. So I think you're going to see a lot of breweries popping up, more staying in a slightly smaller range. And you already have seen it, too, with like some nanos, which means like maybe a 3 to 5 barrel system, popping up with smaller production, but maybe doing it with food on site or things like that. Kind of like an approach like they have in the Northwest, This is the only place you're going to get it is right here in our brew pub. And I see the market share continuing to shift to craft. And if you look at, other things like, other industries like maybe coffee or something. The idea of a $6 cup of coffee 15 years ago, people would have laughed at it. Now It's kind of mainstream. My point is that people have a desire to be able to have a super premium product where, before it was just one of the three, take your pick. People like having that choice, and I think having the freedom to find the style that you like and explore all these other things is what really gets people, and that's why I think you're going to see this trend continuing. Maybe not towards massive breweries, but still that market share coming to craft, probably in a slightly smaller brewery format.
The just being in the beer business in general is highly competitive, but amongst craft brewers, obviously highly competitive. But you guys, all you guys that know each other and have been around the block a few times, we're all friends.
Absolutely.
And so, I mean, with a lot of respect for each other, I know you do some collaborations, and you recently did what was that beer we had the other day? The sour.
The Perfect Strangers. So that was really fun. So we were fortunate enough to have Cascade out of Oregon take an interest in us. And those of you who are beer fans know that Cascade is really one of the premier sour houses in the country. And for them to take an interest in us is a huge honor. So we were, we've had the opportunity to do a lot of collaborations, locally, but, a lot of cases like, okay, what are we going to do, a giant IPA? It doesn't seem like that much fun. Right. Those guys being a sour brewery and us being what we are opposite ends of the spectrum, and that's what made that project interesting. So they had this blueberry quad called Shrieking Violet. I think it was like 11.2%, and it was, I'm not a huge sour beer fan, but this thing just knocked my socks off. It was absolutely amazing. It was slightly tart, not overwhelmingly bitter, huge blueberry presence. And we went up there to their barrel house and did a whole bunch of blending one day. And they brought out this Shrieking Violet. And it's such a bold beer. The only thing that we thought might be able to stand up to it is our Hammerland, which is our Simcoe Mosaic-based double IPA, very aromatic beer. And we blended those two things, and the fruity kind of berry qualities that you get from the Mosaic hops and the blueberries in that beer really made it come together seamlessly. And it was really cool. I mean, it was a fantastic project. And you're talking about the camaraderie between the breweries, and it's the most unique industry that I've ever come across. I mean, because on paper, some of these local breweries, should be like my closest competition in terms of location and product, but in reality, these guys are my best friend. I have the phone number of the brewer of probably every brewery in LA right here on my phone, and everybody will help everybody. I'm short malt today. Can I borrow it? I'm short this, and it happens all the time. And it's, it really is. The quality breweries, everybody is able to sell every drop that they can make. So we don't view it as a competition with each other. It's a competition against that other 90% that we want to go get.
Got 91% they're going to go after. I'm sitting here at the El Segundo Brewing. I'm talking to Rob Croxall, the owner. We're going to come back and we're going to talk about naming his beers. We're going to talk about artwork on beers because you got to get somebody's attention. And then we're going to go to the beers that he has available. And then I want to talk to you, Rob, about things to do here at the brewery. Y'all have a tasting course where for $30 come in here, you do a flight of 4, and you get some 411 about how to taste beer rather than just drink beer. So I'm coming right back, and we're going to talk about that.
You're listening to another classic episode of The Steve Austin Show, only on PodcastOne.
All right, part 2 of Rob Croxall. We're at El Segundo Brewing Company. It's a good day. I didn't have to use my AK, and I'm drinking cold beer with a buddy of mine. Hey, artwork is a key part of selling a beer. You got to get somebody's eye. You got to get somebody's attention. You can't just sample that beer right there that sits on the rack. What was your thoughts when you started, planning out the way the beer was going to look as far as the label goes?
Well, we really had 2 phases to that. When we started up, we were a very small shop, and one of my friends actually did all of our artwork to begin with. A guy named Jim Pagey. He's not an artist by trade, but he's a very creative guy. I used to do Christmas beers when I was homebrewing and hand them out to my friends. And then one year my wife made a Blue House Brewing label kind of as a joke to hand out. And then with a picture of my house on it, because that's where it all happened.
Yep.
And then the next year my buddy Jim Pagey took that same concept and actually made a very, intricate label with, characteristics of my house, my dog, and all kinds of neat stuff. The following year, he made another one. So when it came time to do, really do this, we kind of had a theme already built in. It was kind of around, my house, and because that's where it all started. It was genuine, and we kind of went down that road for the first couple of years. And he did all of our label art and all the art around the brewery. Unfortunately, he fell ill a couple years ago now, and we weren't able to really utilize him for art for a while. So the brewery was growing, and we had to make a shift. I wasn't happy about it. I have a lot of loyalty to my friends who were doing things, for me, and I loved what we had. But we were also stuck, and we had new beer coming out, and we had no art. So I wasn't for trying to have somebody rip off his style and try to continue in the same vein. So we kind of made a break to the style of labels that we have now. We use a local outfit that's just a couple blocks away called Boiling Point. The guy gets El Segundo. I'm very, married to my hometown here. And all of our beer names have something to do with El Segundo, the history or landmarks or something. And these guys up at Boiling Point, they get that. And they really turn out some neat art and very eye-catching, and we've gotten a ton of compliments on these things.
Well, let's talk about the White Dog IPA first, because that's a beer that's named after you. You got a white dog.
That was my dog's name. Her name was White Dog.
Oh, was it White Dog?
Yeah.
So great.
So we had a picture of White Dog from some very early art that Paige did for us. And, the White Dog lends itself because that beer is 50-50 white wheat and barley. So the white, generally when you hear a beer, will, infer that's or imply that's wheat. So the White Dog just seemed to make sense. And that was actually our first, that was our second IPA that came out. And again, we started with an IPA called the Blue House IPA, which was really just my house on the label. And that was a Simcoe heavy IPA. again, learning the hops lesson a hard way. Had to stop making the Blue House IPA because I couldn't get the hops. Then we started making the White Dog.
Okay, so then how did the Hammerland Double IPA get its name?
Hammerland, we were struggling to come up with a name for that beer. We know that we wanted to do a double IPA. And generally, as a rule, I try to use one variety of hops to be more dominant in a beer. I like people to be able to pick out specific characteristics in my beers. So, I've told you before, I think anybody can go out and make a hop bomb, and that's not necessarily interesting. But when you can make it with a certain variety and those characters shine through, that's what I think is really cool. That said, the Hammerland's a little bit of a departure because I love the Mosaic and I love the Simcoe hops. And I was thinking a double IPA with those two together would be great.
Now, what does double IPA mean? Because I'm thinking, okay, if it's double, it's got to have twice the alcohol. But that's not necessarily the case. Maybe it's a little stronger, but what does double IPA mean?
Well, that's basically, you kind of hit it on the head partially. There are specific style guidelines where the alcohol cuts off. There's guidelines for the color. But basic rule of thumb, something over, say, 7.2, 7.5 can be called a double IPA. Generally, that means higher alcohol. It also, in our part of the world, means a more hoppy, more aromatic beer. You don't want to have a double IPA that comes across malty in this market. That's just not going to do very well.
Right. Now on the hop tanker, that's about, 9.5?
Yeah, I think it's 9.2 off the top of my head.
Man, I've got my notes in front of me. So tell me, how did hop tanker come up with that name?
Hop tanker is just a reference to the tankers that are offshore. So El Segundo, as you said, is the second. So it's the second Standard Oil refinery in the state. So we still have the refinery in town, and the oil tankers will dock off the shore. So, everybody knows what the tankers are. So, it's kind of a fun play. They're hop tankers rather than oil tankers.
Okay, talk about it's the airport, the one named after the runway.
2.5 left.
Yeah, say again?
2.5 left.
2.5 left IPA. So obviously, we're right by LAX. You're closer than I am.
Right. So, yeah, we are probably right now about a mile from the runways LAX. 2.5 left is the name of the southernmost runway closest to El Segundo. So, I knew early on that when we did a bigger beer, so 2.5, nice big IPA, Simcoe-based IPA. It's big, loud, obnoxious, jets roaring over town. It's just cool visuals for the branding and just a cool name too. Because people, we actually get a lot of traffic from the airport. One of my very good friends is a pilot, and a lot of his friends come around. Yeah. The pilots love it. They think it's the coolest thing.
Oh, what about the Citra?
Citra we just named after that variety of hops. So that was kind of an easy one. And, really, like I said earlier, I want people to be able to taste, what the ingredients I'm using are. And that beer is a perfect example of, what Citra hops contribute. There's a couple other beers out there that are called Citra, Citra whatever. I would go out on a limb and say that mine's probably a more clear indication of what Citra contributes than some of the other ones, because I think that some other ones will use other varieties also that come across in the aroma.
All right, tell me, you make 2 or 3 stouts.
We make two. We make 2 really.
Yeah.
We make one called Hyperion Stout. That's our lesser one.
Tell me about the Hyperion. Now, where'd that come from?
Well, to put it bluntly, when you flush your toilet in this side of LA, that's where it goes, the Hyperion plant, which is on the other side of the hill. So, people don't know El Segundo. You got the Chevron refinery, you got the airport, and you got Hyperion. So, hey, it is what it is. And, that's what it is. It's the sewage treatment plant. So I figure if you're my customer, you're probably going to have a sense of humor about it, or else you're not going to order it. So that's the first one. That's the entry-level one. Then the other one is over 10%. And it's called Standard Crude. So Standard Oil, El Segundo, crude oil, big, thick sludge. And what we do with the majority of that is over the last couple of years, we've started a somewhat meager barrel program. So we'll pick up various bourbon, whiskey barrels, whatever, and age that bigger stout on those barrels.
Now, you mentioned the Hyperion as being the entry level. Define what you mean by that.
Well, it's just not the killer that's at 10 or 11%. I think it's 7.2 off the top of my head.
Okay. So you mean as far as being lower in alcohol?
Lower in alcohol.
Not lower quality.
No. Yeah,
Got you.
So, and that one, we started with just a base stout with that beer, and over time we started, playing around with different ingredients. And we started adding vanilla to some casks. So nowadays that beer is exclusively a vanilla infused beer. So we actually take Tahitian vanilla beans and cut them and finish the fermentation with those vanilla beans in there. So you get a little bit of a vanilla character in there, which works really neat with the roasty, kind of chocolatey, malty qualities of that stout.
Okay, so in 5 years, I mean, you guys are almost maxed out here in your facility. Describe this facility, and then tell me where you want to be in 5 years.
Right now, the facility, I think we have 12 fermentation vessels, ranging of 2 15-barrel fermenters, 4 30-barrel fermenters, and the rest all 60-barrel fermenters. And we have 3 more on order right now. Once we get those, we are done in this footprint as it is. We started with just 2 30s, so that's how far we've come in just the last 4 years. Where we want to go, I don't have like an end game plan. I love what I'm doing. This is where I'm going to be. And I think we've been in this constant growth mode for 5 years, and it's we're playing, catch up, or we're spending more money or whatever. And we haven't come to a point where we've had a chance to rest yet. So we just finished our new tap room because we just now acquired this whole building. We're about 6,000 square feet. So we just finished our new tap room, and I have these new fermenters coming by the end of July. And after that, maybe we let some dust settle for a little bit and see what we really have on our hands, and then kind of go forward from there. I don't think this is where we're going to stop yet, but we'll just have to see. I don't have a desire to be a massive regional brewery, but I could see being maybe a few times bigger than we are right now. But I got to find the right space, and part of that is finding the space in El Segundo. This is where I live, and I'm not going to be doing El Segundo Brewing of Gardena or something. It's going to have to be the right place in El Segundo.
Right. Okay. So now I know all over Los Angeles people can find your beers in parts of California. So what is the distribution process? Because one thing that I'd like to ask about as far as, can you go nationwide, stick to California, or within 3 to 4 or 5 states of here? What is the growth plan on that as you see it?
Well, our strategy has been, and probably will continue to be, we want to sell beer in our backyard. We're a hoppy brewery, and hops are the first thing to deteriorate over time in beer. So dates on beer is everything in our game. We've built basically our own distribution network, and I offer that we're the biggest self-distributing brewery in LA. We self-distribute LA, OC, and San Diego, and primarily with the reason that we want to be able to watch our dates. There's a lot of breweries out there that have like their secret date codes and Julian dating or whatever it is. Our date stamp is right there on the bottle. I want my people to know what they're buying. I mean, it's being honest with the consumer. But the other flip side of that is we need to make sure that we're keeping product fresh. So for those core markets that we have right there, we self-distribute. We have a distributor now that we signed with who manages Riverside, San Bernardino, and Ventura counties for us, and we have a distributor that takes us up to Northern California. But that's all much smaller volumes and much more, particularly Northern California, is much more strategic about being in the right places, not just every place across the board. And the ability to go national, until I can't sell it in my backyard, I mean, maybe we could set up some accounts with some distributors, nationwide. I'm not really looking at it yet because, just to be honest, we can't keep up with demand right here. So right. I don't want to spread myself any more thin than that, and especially if it's going to mean losing control on my dates.
Okay, so then just as a businessman and also being a guy that likes to brew beer and experiment or come up with the next batch, are you looking to add more different beers to the roster? Because you have your staples that are kicking ass, hard to make. I mean, you're making demand, and it's a lot. So what's the next move as far as adding more stuff?
Well, what we do is we always want to have something new every single quarter, and that's really to keep our customers interested. I mean, we have so many loyal people, and sometimes it's IPAs, sometimes it's not. But the IPAs are generally my recipes. We have the small 15-barrel fermenters, which allow a lot more experimentation. Right. So I've actually, over the last 6 months, given my brewers, we have 3 brewers. We have Matt Cantrell, Todd Slater, and Anthony Morostica. All 3 of those guys are the hands-on guys every day, and they actually designed a black IPA on their own that actually won gold in San Diego in the black IPA category a couple months ago. So I'm starting to give them more leeway on some of the smaller beers. But we're going to continue to do things in that small format, the 15-barrel format, we're probably going to do things that are a little bit more out there. Where with the big, big production tanks, we're probably going to keep doing the more mainstream beers, regular kind of drum beat.
When you were brewing in your backyard and doing the 5-gallon batches, I mean, you were brewing, and that's probably the fun part for you. But now you're overseeing everything. Are you getting to brew as much as you want to? Now are you had to assume a different role because you're wearing a lot of hats here.
Yeah, it's funny because I wanted to leave my desk job, stop looking at spreadsheets and get out there and do something. And I go out and do this brewery and things are going well. And I'm right back to sitting at my desk looking at spreadsheets. But it's different now when you're doing it for yourself.
Yeah. That's the business part of it. And it's part and parcel with trying to be successful.
It is.
But how are you embracing that?
It's okay. I have no problem with it because for the first couple years, I was brewing. I was doing all the deliveries myself. And, I was 40, 41. I was getting my butt kicked out there, lifting those 173-pound kegs over and over daily, wears on you pretty quick. I had Tom Kelly, who's my director of sales. He's also certified Cicerone. He was doing all my sales for me, but for the longest time it was us two, and then I got some help from my dad on the brewing side and my buddy Randy on the brewing side. But as we grow, obviously I can't do this kind of production by myself. So now we have the 3 brewers, who are doing the majority. I still do the vast majority of the recipe development. They'll do some playing around on the 15 sometimes. But managing the growth, we really have kind of 3 facets to this business, or 4. You have the marketing side, we have our sales side, we have the taproom side, and we have the production side. And I get to oversee all that, so I can't spend 8 hours a day in the brew house anymore. I still do once in a while,
right?
To cover for people. We really try to be respectful of people's private time, and when they want to do stuff and go away, I'm happy to step in and fill their shoes. But most of the time, I'm in here on my computer, or but when I say in here, we're literally 15 feet away from the brew house floor. So.
And there's a window to look through so you can see everything. It still looks fun.
Right.
Hey, you brought up Tom Kelly. You brought up the word Cicerone. And no, that's not an Italian word for sissy. That's a cat. It's like a sommelier knows a lot about wine. It's a cat that knows a lot about beer. So that brings me to, and the thing we'll wrap up with one of the experiences here at El Segundo Brewing. You can come in and learn how to taste beer, and Tom is a part of that, and the other, Randy.
Oh, no, Greg Bechtel. Greg's the other guy.
Okay, so tell me about this.
Okay, so Tom is one of our Cicerones, and Greg Bechtel is the other. I think.
Now, what qualifies one to be a Cicerone?
Cicerone is an actual test certification that you have to test based, and you have to understand serving, history, styles. It's like you explained. It's like a sommelier in the beer world. Right. It's an expert in beer. I'm very fortunate that we have 2 of those guys on staff, and they're both very knowledgeable and very good at what we do. And actually, it's an amazing working relationship for us because I am not a Cicerone. I know what I like in my styles. These guys have much more breadth than I do style-wise, and so.
But do you all speak the same language?
Oh, yeah.
Because in anything in life, and especially whether it's trucks, whether it's colors, whether it's beers, subjectivity comes into play.
Yeah.
So, y'all all speak the language, or do you come from the same palate?
I wouldn't say we come from the same palate, but over the the last 4 years, I think we've come to work together very well. And I mean, I understand those guys' palates, and they understand my palate, and we do speak the same language. And I like to think that I've gotten much better and a much more breadth beer-wise because of those guys, and I know that they've gotten much better from a technical brewing perspective, based on the relationship with us.
So someone wants to come in here and learn how to taste beer.
That's
How's
right.
That process
so you
go?
Brought up the class. So over the years, we've done this kind of on and off for a while, but now that we have some more space to play with in the tap room, Tom and Greg will host courses, and I think they have a sour style course coming up, like American style sours versus traditional sours, or we've done hops classes before, and it's for a meager fee, like $30 or something like that. People come in, they get their samples, their tastings, and they get walked through a tasting with the Cicerones, pointing out the characteristics, the history, how you're supposed to taste it. So it's kind of it's a beer geek, kind of paradise thing.
No, I dig it though. I mean, because man, I drank a lot of damn beer. And then finally, when I made the transition to the pale ales and then to the IPAs, it's a gradual swing. A lot of people listen to me on this podcast, and I'll say, man, I just love those IPAs. And people go out and try one, they'll say, oh, man, it was a little much. Well, you got to understand, I went from the light beer, through the, some of the pale ales and some lagers and onto the IPAs. So it's a 6 to 8 month swing for me to make that transition, and now this is where I'm at. I mean, like you're an IPA guy,
yeah,
for the most part. You
yeah.
brew anything you want, but you're an IPA guy. So when you bring someone in here, all of a sudden, it's like, okay, here's what you're tasting, here's why,
exactly.
And there's a reason for all this, and these are the characteristics to look for.
Right. That's the most critical thing, I think, as far as bringing new people into the craft beer fold. It's about the education. All of our staff, all of our servers, they're all there's a lower level for Cicerone certification too. It's a beer server certification. They're all certified beer servers. They all know our beer very well, and really their mission is to interact with the consumers and educate them. And I think you hit the nail on the head. You can't just give somebody a big, hoppy, bitter beer and say, here, drink it, it's good.
Yeah, it's good because I say it's good.
Right.
Yeah.
You need to set expectations, and when people go in the right frame of mind, and here's what I'm going to taste, and it's going to be bitter, but I expect it.
Right.
Completely different outcome than crushing them over the head with hops.
And let's end on this note, Rob, because on my Twitter account, Steve Austin BSR, and on y'all's Twitter account, which is because you guys are on Twitter, is... Okay. At ESBC
Brews. At ESBC Brews.
At ESBC Brews, because I follow you guys. But a lot of times, every now and then, I'll talk about the IPAs and the craft beer movement because I dig it. And I dig beer in general. I love beer. I'm 50 years old. I enjoy the things in life that I love, and I love to drink good beer. And so the fact that the craft beer market is where I find it these days, and don't get me wrong, I'll slug down a Bud Light just like the next guy. But left to my own devices, left to my own pocketbook, left to my own taste, I choose to drink an IPA, which is brewed by people that make craft beer. If one of those bigs made a great IPA, I'd drink it. When I talked about the bigs, and I left my computer, I had the top 50 selling beers in the United States of America here. The people that are making that beer are working their ass off. Well, the people that are making this beer are working their ass off. I came here a couple of weeks ago when Rob was making a batch of beer and watching the guys clean out tanks, taking out grains, malts, all this other stuff, working their ass off. So it's the same work. It's just going down a different road. Hey, man, and that's what life is. I mean, you go down the main road and then you branch off on a different road, and that is your life. So we're sitting here talking with Rob Croxall over at El Segundo Brewing Company. If you're down in L.A., if you're coming through L.A., you get a chance to come down there and check his place out. Do. It's a friendly place. You won't meet nobody that ain't got a smile on their face. It's 140 Main Street. They make good stuff. Come down there and check out the new tap room, and it's a badass place, and that's all I got to say about that. And I want to thank Rob for letting me come down here and use up an hour of his time and talk about beers. And I'm sorry that I left my computer at home because I had a bunch of damn facts and stuff that I was going to throw at you, but that's the way. I always call this thing, Rob, a one-man cluster muck. If there's a way to muck it up, I will, and I have. I appreciate your time.
Hey, Steve, thank you very much. It's a pleasure having you down here.
All right, stay thirsty, my friend.
Will do.
Thank you for joining us for another classic episode of The Steve Austin Show. Please leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts and tell your friends. For more Steve Austin Show, go to PodcastOne.com. That's PodcastOne.com.
Stream the biggest blockbusters this summer with Popcorn Summer Movies on Pluto TV. Experience nonstop action with the first 4 Mission Impossible movies and Top Gun. Laugh out loud to comedies like Anchorman, The Legend of Ron Burgundy, and The Backup Plan. With thousands of free movies, Pluto TV has something for everyone. Available on live TV and on demand. Download Pluto TV on all your favorite devices and start streaming now.
Have you ever heard that story that Napoleon used the Egyptian Sphinx for target practice and shot its nose off? Or maybe you've heard that a French astrologer named Nostradamus correctly predicted nearly 500 years of human history. Or maybe someone told you that the legendary blues guitarist Robert Johnson sold his soul to the devil at a crossroads in Mississippi. These stories are what I like to call historical myths. Great little tales that may or may not have any basis in historical fact. On Our Fake History, we explore these historical myths and try to determine what's fact, what's fiction, and what is such a good story it simply must be told. If you dig stories about death-obsessed emperors, lost civilizations, desperate sieges, voodoo black magic, and famous historical figures you thought you knew, then Our Fake History might just be your new favorite podcast. If you dig it, then subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts.